know your name.
Welcome to Slow News Day Live. My name's Steve Boykin, and I am here in beautiful Boulder Creek, California, where the flannel shirt is our state flag, the pit bull is our state bird, and cannabis is our state flower. I am joined this evening by Nial Elkim. He just completed a 27-day long water fast to raise support and awareness for progressive candidates, not limited to, but most assuredly, Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard. Pleased to have him on tonight. Niall, how's it going, man?
It's going good. I finally got to eat, so I'm in a much better mood now.
Yeah, congratulations on that, by the way. And fuck, dude, I gotta know, what was your first? What do you eat after fasting for 27 days? You
So
got
I ran around all day, well, for a couple hours at the end of the day because I worked earlier, looking for wild caught salmon because I love sashimi salmon, and I've sworn off the farm raised stuff because it's crap. So I got 2 pounds of that with the skin on. Took the scales off, fried it just for a second on the skin side to soften the skin. Chop that up, have it with my sashimi ginger and my wasabi and my soy sauce and some organic strawberries, and that was pretty fucking good. Sorry, but I don't know if you have a swear jar or swear rule.
you can swear on this show. Uh,
All right,
I, I do.
good.
Yeah, I would imagine that you wouldn't be able to go like, I don't know, go grab a burger or something. That would probably tear you up your guts
Yeah,
100. I have never like, I've gone long periods of time without food, but not on purpose. And
yeah,
uh, never because I was trying to make a point, more that like other people needed to be fed more than I did, and yeah, it's just shit, man. So I've never experienced that, so I don't know. Like, I haven't trained up for it. I would imagine it's something. I think I heard you say on Ron's show that you had water fasted before. You weren't just going into this like completely unaware and totally half cocked.
right. Yeah, I've done a 20. I already did a 20-day this year, earlier in this year, just for health reasons, and I just thought the number 27 was iconic in 2016. So I do that. And I was just looking for a way to try to do something, interesting, to be an activist when I'm like barely have any time to participate in anything. Right. So
Yeah.
I have a tough time going to protests or going to organizing things. Basically, I've got a couple hours every night, and then I can play with my phone during the day. But yeah, after a long water fast, I find the cleanest foods are best. I like raw fish more than cooked fish. The other ingredients are okay. They don't seem to be an issue, but I would say anybody doing it should avoid processed carbs. That's the really big kind of dangerous component. For one, it'll probably constipate you, but also you do run a small risk of what's called refeeding syndrome, which is a critical imbalance of your electrolytes that happens as a kind of cascade event, and has been known to happen with people that are like starving to death, and they give them like IV garbage and feed them
Mm-hmm.
like porridge and stuff. Whereas real food, I've never heard of ever causing that. So and I've done it many, many times, so I feel safe.
Can I ask you a weird question?
Sure, yeah. All the
What do
weird
you
you want.
consider, like, what constitutes real food in your view?
A whole food from nature or close
Okay.
to nature, so a whole vegetable would be fine. Fish, beef, chicken, stuff that doesn't have hormones and pesticides and herbicides obviously is better. But as long as it's a whole food, it's not a grain, because all grains are super processed. You can't chew on like ryegrass and get anything out of it. Although that would probably be fine if you did chew on the raw ryegrass. Mushrooms, fruit. I try to
Okay.
avoid heavy sugars right afterward too. I find that's that's not so good either, because it kind of blows up your bacteria system right
Right.
away, and that causes more difficulty adjusting. Yeah.
Well, uh, here's a friend of mine named John Brisson, and he is a gut health guru.
Yeah.
In fact, he wrote a book called "Fixing Your Gut."
Mm.
Uh, I would recommend people look him up. I'll throw that guy's name and his site in the show notes because he's a fascinating individual outside of that. Uh, but the gut health stuff is absolutely key. And I don't necessarily want to make this entire show about diet.
No,
Um,
I like tangents, and
but
if someone can speak competently to gut health and the microbiome in the body, they're probably a pretty smart guy. I've often told people we will never understand health completely until we have a computer the size of a planet, because if you take all of the different bacteria that we rely on, which there's like over 10,000 different species, right, that we know of, and you multiply all those factors, those interrelated factors together, you're talking about over a Googleplex of health factors. So there's no way that you can precisely understand what makes us healthy. There's a lot of intuition that goes into it, but the people that are trying to forge that Googleplex, I have a lot of respect for them, because that's not an easy thing to even begin to attempt to do.
yeah, no, and I would consider John one of those guys. I've never heard someone speak in um, such depth with immediately able to point to where he got the information, how he obtained the information. If it's theorization or speculation, he'll say that beforehand. If you know,
Right.
and there's a forthrightness to his work that I really admire. Um, yeah, and having said that, I also admire people who are willing to take a stand for just about anything that at least I think is a right thing to stand for. Um, which, you know, that's everyone's bias in that. But um you said you have a limited uh you know limited time and limited ways that you can be an activist, and we talk on this show a lot about decentralized activism,
Yep.
which is activism that can't be infiltrated. So if it's just you on a water fast, you know that you're not going to be accused of blowing anybody up because it's just you. You
Yep.
know, nobody's going to try and write a law banning water fasting because, let's say, you decided to wear black skinny jeans while you were water fasting, or put a bandana over your face while you
Sure.
were doing
Yeah, it's
uh
not practical to attack just me unless they want to just off me because I became too much of a threat, but I'm not near that level yet. So
right. No, I don't think I'll be getting a red scarf and a doorknob anytime soon either, but you never know, man. You never know.
well,
It's a
just
weird old world.
it means you've done something very effective and powerful if that happens, I suppose, right? Or some nut figured out where you live, I guess. But yeah, I agree. A lot of things in life, I've actually thought about this in great detail, should be much more decentralized and should be catered to it. And I think modern technology makes that much more possible. I've often said there's a lot of people out there with really great skills and talents. And this is just kind of an aside from politics, but a similar topic, that would do a great deal of work if you just had like an open factory or an open workspace, maybe art studio, sculpting, jewelry making, something that's artisan, but you can teach them to do it, and you have people there to help them make sure they're safe, and they can come work as long as they want. They make a percentage of what they make, and they make an hourly wage while they're there, but they're not required to come any amount of time. They're not, they're not required to leave at any amount of time. It's just open format, free work. I don't like the Uber kind of setup necessarily, because obviously that's been exploited to exploit workers. I'd like to do something like that, but that serves workers instead. Kind of like unionized level benefits for something like Uber. and various, handyman kind of things. Dig a hole in my
Well, that's
yard, get
kind
rid
of
of the
where
debris.
a big segment of the people who advocate the federal jobs guarantee head as soon as they bring that up.
Yeah.
What you're talking about, I would like to see that in conjunction with a sort of like a people's lyceum, just a general all around school
Oh yeah,
where
no, I want
you
free
know,
education all the way up and down. Absolutely.
but I mean,
No,
for no matter who you are, what your skill set is, or what your interests are, what your age group is,
no, yeah,
if
no,
there
no,
are, like
no,
open
no conditions.
they're like,
Ab-
hey, fuck it, I want to learn how to play Iron Maiden on the harp. Teach me that shit. Somebody can pop up and be like, yeah, as a matter of fact, I know how to play Iron Maiden on the harp. It's
Right.
fucking wild here.
If like this 70-year-old guy who will never be a brain surgeon wants to sit in all the brain surgery lectures and have access to all the information, he should be allowed to, and it should be free and open. I mean, this is like Foucault says, um, that educational institutions are not designed to spread knowledge; they're designed to monopolize and hide knowledge, and I 100% agree with that. Not to mention warp and propagandize and gaslight with knowledge and make up fake knowledge, but that's a side issue.
Well,
Um,
there's so many people who capitalize off of like what Joe Rogan refers to as woo,
as what?
as woo.
Woo. I don't know.
Nonsense,
I'm not aware of it.
nonsense, garbage, like
Oh, sure.
sort of like some level of some degree of mysticism or some degree of philosophical thought, or even when it comes down to movements like the Proud Boys or
Mhm.
um, you know what it is they're selling
A
the
persona or a lifestyle or
that doesn't
idea,
really, yeah, an idea that's either unattainable or is only attainable by becoming a despicable human being.
or just a shell of a person that represents something but is not actually a thing. Um,
Absolutely, but the ability to appear genuine, there's so much room for it because culturally we're starved of that.
oh yeah,
We're fed on just absolute fucking uh I don't know, low grade pablum.
yeah. I mean, it's the marketing, it's the corporatism. Kind of fascist takeover of our communication systems. They know that they need to control the conversation, or they're going to lose control of power. And so, and obviously, there's the profit motives of corporations. So they trot out people saying things they don't believe in because what actor believes in shredded wheat or whatever they're selling, um, and they push it and push it and push it because they think that as long as they just dominate everything, they'll succeed. And they were somewhat right before the internet. That's why television is so powerful with boomers and just older people in general now. I mean, those people are so lost. It's kind of sad, and I feel bad. But at the same time, you get angry at them because they reflect the pathology that they've been, propagandized to feel and to believe. So yeah, I agree. And I tell this to people a lot. They try to make like their content really slick and commercial and nice, and have a perfect logo and perfect setup and have a perfect speaking timbre and tempo. And it's like, no, people don't respond to that. Just, I mean, a little bit of that might help frame things, but inside the frame, you want some kind of realism, right? And authenticism, and that's what people are going to respond to. So I
Well, that's why
completely
people
agree.
like Tapper practice sincere face in the mirror. That's why Stephen Colbert, even as part of his shtick, to like show you all the different faces of human he can do.
Yeah.
And if that isn't shining light on your own hypocrisy, I don't know what the fuck is. But
I mean, I
that's
know I've seen videos of myself and I've been like, I've kind of cringed at myself. And I know a lot of my earlier videos, because I do have a YouTube channel. I call it Nial Elkim versus the World because I'm not very creative, I guess, when it comes to names. And it was the first thing that came to me. But like my early videos are really, really bad, right? But I never consciously was like, stop doing that or start doing that or make this face. It was just like the more I did it, there was a natural evolution where things got a little more presentable, and I was a little less frantic with my speaking tone and a little more organized in that format. And I think that's the better way to go than to like have a coach or something, you know.
I'm going to tell you a story about both first ever episodes of this show. Okay.
Okay.
The first episode of this show, my good friend from Minnesota was here, and at the time, like, he was making plans to move out, not necessarily to this exact location, but around here. I was gonna have him co-host the show with me, and Ron Placone was it was guest number one, and we got Ron on the chat, and I didn't introduce the show. I just started talking to Ron. We went over to my buddy who was having a full-on panic attack, and he just broke. And I choked my way through about another 15 or 20 minutes of it, and we got out of there. And I kept the flash drive as a talisman to ward off future failures. But I'm not 100% certain that worked. And then the second first show that we had, I had a different co-host who read off her introduction off of note cards like she was a fucking hostage, saying that whatever organization that had captured her was all powerful and death to America. And it was fucking hilarious, dude. Like, it was I didn't, bro. I did a bad and showed up like super stoned to the debut episode, and then proceeded to get more stoned all the way through it, just to not call attention to the hostage card thing until like it was well past and like we could joke about the shit. But so I get that, dude. I do. I fucking shoot from my deck when I do live streams, or from a fucking screen room. When I'm not in the studio, and when I am in the studio, it is more of a professional setting, and I have a producer, and he's, it's a working recording studio 7 days a week, and fucking bands come in and cut albums there and shit, and like,
That's cool.
And Ron's come up and done a comedy night there. We're gonna do more comedy nights and shit like that. It was once upon a time, it was a whorehouse. It has a plaque dedicated to the fact that it used to be a whorehouse. And then it was a post office, and it was some other shit. And now it's a fucking working studio. And there's
yeah, I like the history of buildings. I like knowing what was there before. There's a bar in Los Angeles on Sunset, and not like the best, not one of the nicer parts of Sunset, but an okay part. It's actually getting like hipsterized now. But the bar used to be a cop bar, and they used to take suspects there and beat them and interrogate them, right? So this, it's terrible, right? But like when you go in there, you can feel it, and you're aware because you know it, and it's like, yeah, this looks like that kind of place. And now everybody there is pretty trendy, or not necessarily not trendy in a yuppie way, but like in a younger. I still live with grandma, but I have a music career kind of way, right?
Okay.
But yeah, so I actually I like antiques. I like learning local history. I like talking to people that have been around, even if I don't agree with them politically. I find all that stuff grounds me in where I am in the universe. Even if it's subject to interpretation.
One of the things that's crazy about the fucking cartoon world that we live in is that as independent content creators, we have to combat the rewriting of real time. More like, we have to spend a considerable amount of time doing that, not to mention the rewriting of history that constantly takes place, the rewriting of recent history, the whitewashing of the fucking past through everywhere, and the fact that like written history, at least in our textbooks, is not an accurate version of history to begin with.
No.
Like, I don't know who can claim to know history except for the history that consists of personal accounts, maybe some, you get one side through a court record, you get one side through like who owned what land when, or you can look
Right.
at it leadership, but there's only a certain amount of history that's reclaimable.
I mean, how much of
Really.
the indigenous history is there?
Yeah,
How much?
there's only a small amount of history itself that's reclaimable, and it's only going to be through the eyes of the individual that wrote it.
Yeah. And
Right? Like,
obviously, yeah, it's mostly going to be through the perception of the victor, unfortunately. Even the victor will make an attempt to make it seem realistic from the eyes of the victim, but still excluding and twisting things and warping it for their own benefit. There's always the liberals side of things where they pretend to be compassionate when they're really still serving the same kind of I would say settler colonial framework. That's pretty brutal and awful. I mean, even right now today, there's at least one reservation I know of where young women have just been disappearing like crazy, and it's they attribute it to white men coming in, kidnapping them, raping them, and murdering them. And there's some loophole where because it's a reservation and the offender is not from the reservation, like the government like won't even do anything about it. It's
yeah.
so there's still some really really awful stuff going on that doesn't get reported much,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
you're in Southern California. I mean, it's fucking crazy down there. It's crazy here in NorCal too, but like the extra element of people get even more stupid when it's hot for extremely long periods of time if they're not used to being hot for extremely long periods
Oh
of
yeah,
time.
yeah, I agree.
Uh,
I often tell people that if you look at like violent crime statistics, if you can exclude things like abject poverty and not even so much abject poverty, but to some extent, mostly because of the pollution that comes with it, like lead levels and things like that, you'll find that the correlation of violence is with heat. So the hotter an area is, the more violence there's going to be, and the colder it is, the most of the violence is going to be self violence. People are going to kill themselves because they don't have enough sunlight, but they don't fight in the streets so much, and so there's a lot of interesting things that go on with humanity based on the climate you're in.
which which is why I say that we won't have complete data on climate until they incorporate geoengineering with their climate data, which we've got 100 years of geoengineering history, but it's not incorporated into the climate models, just like fracking isn't incorporated into the earthquake models.
Now, geoengineering, are you talking about things like HARP, or are you talking about something else?
Not specifically like HARP, but it in terms of weather modification,
Right.
that
So
the
HARP-like things, yeah, where they
um,
see clouds and yeah.
if they can make it rain in Dubai every afternoon at 3 o'clock,
Do
it
they
would.
do they do that?
Yeah, it's like a tour. Yeah, it's like a not just a tourist attraction, but it's a thing to prove how insanely wealthy
Oh,
Dubai is.
I'd never heard that.
They can afford to make it rain every
But
afternoon.
that's a good like practical demonstration of yes, this is going on a regular basis. And
Right.
obviously, it was going on for a long time beforehand because the military would have been doing it 30 years beforehand, right? Or
Absolutely. And we've got the Air Force coming out saying, oh yeah, by the way, chemtrails are totally real and they're what's going to save the planet because now we're going to add uh sulfur dioxide to the barium and aluminum, and we're going to refract the sun back.
yeah, there's a
And
lot of these plans. Yeah.
uh and and So they're on the one hand, they're validating everyone who said these things are real, and on the other hand, they're trying to immediately spin it to, but guess what? It's going to save us, and it's an admission that these programs have existed. But again, the data because there's corresponding research as to the impact that it has on the environment.
Oh yeah, the
You
environment,
know,
human health, all kinds of things. They have
but
all
none
they
of
have
that
all this
data is
data. Yeah.
incorporated into the climate science,
Hmm.
and I'm saying that it's incomplete until it.
That's probably true. Yeah.
And I'm as pissed that fracking isn't considered when they track, predict, and map earthquakes.
No, fracking is absolutely abominable. I think it should be banned completely. But yeah, I was listening to an interesting Jamarl Thomas interview with a climate scientist. I don't know if you've seen Jamarl Thomas, the
Oh
progressive
yeah,
soapbox. He's pretty great. Just a really brilliant
yeah.
guy.
He's been on the show before.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But he was talking to a climate scientist saying that if we stopped burning coal today, we would be dead like within a decade because all the particulate in the air from coal is actually dimming the sun. And you would have like an extra 5 degrees within a decade if you stopped burning coal. Like
Yeah,
long term, it increases temperature, but short term, it's like just a suicide pact, right? To try and get right. So this guy is basically like, we're fucked. We're gonna die. I'm sorry, right? I've
yeah.
given up. I don't. I think human beings are capable of solving large problems. Um, but yeah, I mean, it goes to the same. It's an indirect method of climate control. Same kind of thing they're trying to do. But yeah, I mean, it's a terrifying subject. There's a reason Noam Chomsky calls the Republican Party the most dangerous organization in the history of the earth. And it's because of their willful plunge toward annihilation through climate change, through global warming. And that's what and I trust Chomsky. Like, you always hear these people, climate science, climate change denialists come out. And it's like, I'm not a climate scientist. I can't even vet their data. I just can't. It's too much, right? But I can say I know Noam Chomsky has never ever been wrong, right? And he's been on this for like 30, 40 years, right?
So
If Yeah,
I mean, we know that in the late 70s, early 80s, Exxon commissioned a study.
right.
And that Exxon's own study came back saying, "Oh, by the way, you are contributing to a mass climate collapse."
Oh
So
yeah, yeah.
the Pentagon called it a national security threat. My problem with it, and this is a problem, but not the real. It's not what they want the people on the right to focus on, but it's one that they call direct attention to that never gets explored in the center or on the left, because the center is 100% responsible for it, and that's that there is a money making scam involved in
Oh,
pushing climate change,
absolutely.
and if any of these motherfuckers were serious about it, there would be mass planetary reforestation, because that's what's going to process your fucking carbon.
I was just talking to Ron Placone about that the other day, somewhat attached to diet because we were talking about diet for a minute after his comedy show. Um, but that there's this. I don't know if you've ever seen that Doug Stanhope bit where he says the conservatives are always saying that the lazy Mexicans are stealing all of our jobs, right? Which is a total contradiction. So that's the joke, right? If they're
Right, right,
lazy, how
right.
can they be
Yeah,
stealing all the jobs? I love Doug Stanhope. But all these guys like Yang and all these tech people keep telling us there's no jobs in the future. We're all going to be on universal basic income, yada, yada, yada. But then at the same time, they tell us we can't reforest the world and we can't have some kind of
right,
traditional ancestral farming because it's too much work. It's like, I thought there was no jobs, right?
right,
So can't we all be sheep herders and goat herders and fertilize and water all the land and plant all the plants that would help uh, turn like California into like a succulent garden that sequesters a whole lot of carbon, and other places into other kinds of gardens, and reroute rivers and things to get maximum, all the kinds of things we could do. Try to, you know, not only to fight climate change, but to create a healthy food system, a sustainable food system where we can take a certain amount from the ocean, farm the ocean. The farming the ocean is super easy, and we got plenty of ocean, right? Do bivalves all over the place and seaweed on rope things and such. Um, so we can feed the world a very healthy diet. We don't have to feed them a bunch of crap. Healthier people make better decisions. They're less violent. Um, and all of this stuff sequesters carbon, and so it helps solve climate change, right? So this is kind of one of my big pushes is, no, we can't just focus on a plant-based diet, because we have to have a focus on both animals and plants and raising them, and you need the incentives for both, because you need a complete biosphere. You can't just like kill all the animals and just have plants growing, right?
Right.
This is that doesn't work. I mean, I guess you could not kill the animals, but I think I don't think that's healthy for one. I don't think there's a lot, and I get a lot of flack on the left about
Well, now it
criticizing
would allow
the
for
vegan thing.
a dominant apex predator to fucking breed like crazy fucking and go. I don't know. There's that's a very very different conversation. Interesting, but I real quick though, you had a matching donation thing, right?
Right.
With
Well, it
past,
wasn't matching because I don't
or
have
not
any kind of.
matching, but you had a donation option or
Right.
challenge.
So what it was originally was, if I don't make it to 27 days, I'm going to donate $27 to one of those candidates, or split it. And if I do, people would say, well, I think you're going to get to 15 days, and if you get to 15 days, I'll donate $15. Those were the pledges. Um, and obviously, since I got to 27, everybody's pledges, I fulfilled the conditions, so they should all be going through now, and I trust them to do that because it's an honor code thing. We raised, well, I, the royal we. So the fundraiser raised $672 in pledges, which isn't a crazy amount of money, but I don't have a huge platform, and it's a lot of my followers on Twitter that pledged, I think,
Hmm.
and fewer people that didn't know me. So I understand why the number kind of stayed small, but it's still not a tiny number. Like last election, I felt like I was giving a whole lot, because in 2016 I gave like $250 to Bernie Sanders, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and I felt like that was a lot, because I'm a young family man, and I've got a wife telling me what I can spend money on, right? Um, which is fine, it's part of life. But yeah, so I was thrilled with that amount of money, and it kept me motivated to finish the fast. So yeah, 672, not too bad. I'm also an artist, so I'm thinking about doing like Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard paintings or drawings, or both, and like auctioning those off. People donate to the candidates, and then they pay shipping, and I'll just send it to them, whatever the shipping cost is. Something like that, maybe for the next thing, would be cool.
Groovy. Um, I uh, I would you're in Orange County. Um, yeah, I don't. I would also encourage. Like, what do you think that they're actually going to allow Bernie Sanders anywhere near the presidency? You think he'll be able to get through the convention uncontested?
Oh, well, not uncontested. I think just like last time, he has to win an overwhelming amount. So I think there's huge amounts of rigging, right? But I do think those systems they have to rig are vulnerable to being overwhelmed. So it just has to be an unprecedented activism. And he does have 1 million volunteers. That's a lot, right? And 2 million donations now. He's had 2 cycles to build up his power base. I'm sure people didn't want FDR to become president either, right? They kind of knew
Well,
what
there
he
was
was.
a plot to have a military coup
Yeah,
and install
the Bushes. Yeah,
yeah, and install I think it was Smedley Butler of all people.
ha, that's
Uh,
funny.
and he blew the whistle on him and
Yeah,
fucking
I think that's right. Yeah,
um it's a wild little piece of history because it was like Prescott Bush and a couple of his cohort, the Rockefellers,
Yeah.
and who else? Some of the OSS, like the original OSS people, and uh, the Dulles brothers'
Well,
father.
these were also all the people that were supporting the Nazis, right, and profiting off the
Yeah,
Nazis.
yeah.
So, I mean, these were the scum of the earth, and they all should have been either imprisoned or executed after World War II. I'm not a big fan of execution, but I might make an exception for the Rockefellers and the Bushes, especially people that were blatantly helping the Nazis. I mean, like, if the wealthy had had the option, they probably would have entered the war on the side of the Nazis. The only reason they weren't able to do that was because there was a huge labor and communist and socialist movement, and their houses all would have been burned down and they would have been hung in the streets, right? So
Well,
that's
they got away with low key funding being part of the funding for Nazi Germany throughout the war. They didn't
yeah.
stop
No, they
getting,
didn't stop.
you know,
Yeah. But they didn't get
but
the
they
US
were
to
able to keep
enter
that
on the side of the
quiet,
Nazis, yeah.
and they were able to play both sides, and they were able to profit off of both sides.
Right.
To the point of two future presidents, one of whom got to be president for 12 years after being director of the CIA, after being fucking part
Which
of
president
murdering
was that?
George Bush, George H.W. Bush. He went from the director of the CIA to being Ronald Reagan's vice president.
Oh, okay.
Ronald
Yeah.
Reagan was
But
a
not president for 12 years, he was
well,
president for 4, but you're saying a level of
ostensibly
authority
president
that's
for 12
similar.
years because Ronald Reagan was a straight up
Oh,
actor
I
and
see. Yeah,
fucking,
okay.
it was 100% George H.W. Bush and his group
I
of people that ran the
I follow
country
you.
throughout the entire Reagan
Yeah.
administration, which includes Roy Cohn,
Mhm.
who was um, at that time running the pedophile, sex trafficking, blackmail for power scheme in the U.S. and groomed Donald Trump and gave Jeffrey Epstein his job and was such a good friend to the Reagan family that's why they finally said something about they acknowledged that AIDS existed was when Roy Cohn died of AIDS.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know who the second, supreme commander of NATO was? He was, he was the ex, second hand to, who's the guy who in Africa for the Nazis? Rommel.
Rommel.
He was second to Rommel. He was serving as Rommel's second. He was involved in one of the attempts to assassinate Hitler, but they never said he was an anti-fascist. They said he was a Mussolini-style fascist instead of a Nazi-style fascist, and they made him the supreme commander of NATO as the second supreme commander of
Oh,
NATO. Right?
right. I can't
Yeah.
remember the guy's
I
name, but
can't remember his name either, but it's just insane that people this isn't like common knowledge stuff. Like, people, it's probably 1% of the population that knows things like this,
well,
right?
people just found out recently that Elizabeth Warren was vetted for Hillary's vice president and
Yeah.
had already accepted the position. And my point of contention on that is like months ago, I had a guy on this show who works in Hollywood who worked out of the fucking the writing firm that
Mhm.
produces content for the DNC. He personally wrote content for the 4 vice presidential candidates that Hillary Clinton's campaign had approved. And Elizabeth Warren was one of those candidates.
Yeah, it's funny because in 2015, before the primaries, I was really bullish on pushing Warren. I really wanted her to run. I was convinced that she was a good person and a good progressive. I even called her office and said, "Please run." I wasn't even aware of Bernie Sanders at the time. Um, and of course, I'm not someone who believes Bernie Sanders is a perfect human being. I have plenty of reservations about him, but he's a wonderful instrument at this time, I believe. Um, but um, but yeah, now I mean, Warren. I think Warren is the worst person for progressives and the left of all of the candidates, right? So, I mean, you got someone like Biden, but he's obvious, right? He's just an obvious centrist, and there's no surprise there. He doesn't steal any of the thunder from the progressive base. Warren Warren recruits a bunch of the progressive base, and then at a critical time, when things need to go, everyone needs to march in lockstep to get something done, like protest, the Democratic convention or something, or that's when she deploys her countermeasures, and that's when
So
that's when she fucks us, right? So
Elizabeth Warren has, and I've said this quite a bit, um, for a fucking minute now. Elizabeth Warren has created this now marketable template of how to be a successful fake progressive.
yep.
And that includes writing really bold progressive legislation during periods of time where it's never going to see the light of day.
Right, and usually
Um,
on paper, but not introduced as a bill.
Absolutely, and she's got sound bites down. And that's all she needed to get her progressive bona fides was sound bites. Because while she was crafting the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and
Well,
for the
she didn't
first
even
couple of
craft it.
years,
That was
it,
done before her. She just got
well,
appointed to it, but
she was
yeah, she was
she
part of
was
it.
given $1.7 million
Mhm,
over like two or a three donation cycle period
mhm.
by the securities and financial industry.
Right,
uh,
through,
which
like, law firms or something.
ostensibly the board that she was being put in charge of oversight to regulate. And like what she did with Standing Rock was typical at that point. What she did by refusing to endorse anyone, then endorsing Hillary Clinton, was something that they had all planned. All of the Democratic women senators had planned on doing before anyone had announced they were running for president. Um, she is a very, very, very fucking conservative political operator.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean she waits until consensus has already been made, and then she does what the herd does because it's the sensible thing to do. When
Well,
she's
yeah.
out there saying that she has these plans that no one's ever thought of, they're all on Bernie Sanders's
Right. The
2016
reason
platform.
she does that is because when she steps in when there's already a consensus for something, her involvement makes no difference. So she's not actually helping progressives, right? And but
She's not here to help
she
progressives.
does promote her own cred at that point. But if her involvement would make the difference, she will never step in because she is a conservative, she's a right winger, and she's just realized that the best way to screw over progressives is to pretend to be one. Right. And she didn't become a Democrat until the third way in the Clintons turned the Democratic Party into an anti-labor party. Right. That's when she shifted. And people before that, when she was younger, said she was a diehard Republican or a diehard conservative. Right. I mean, she went through Reagan as a Republican, and she had no problem with that. She had a law degree. You don't get a law degree and not have political sense. She says, "Oh, I wasn't very political." Fucking bullshit, right? If you get
Well,
a
I
law
mean,
degree, you're steeped in politics,
why
especially
why
Harvard.
anybody, okay, look, man, why anybody goes and tries to fucking bullshit in front of Charlemagne the God anymore is beyond me. All right, because that dude has a phenomenal bullshit detector. Like and if you're coming like and I'm sure that he even doesn't get to go as deep as he wants to on his own show because of the network that is signing his checks. But his bullshit radar is on point, dude. And every presidential candidate that's come onto that show and's tried to say some really dumb shit, he's there with a casual one-liner that just destroys these motherfuckers, and it's great,
Well,
dude.
you notice too when he asked her, "When did you realize
I just
you weren't
let
a Native
everybody
American?"
know that I watch the fucking Breakfast Club.
Yeah. But when he had, I didn't watch the whole thing. I don't watch it regularly, but I did see the clips. But when he asked her, "When did you realize you weren't a Native American?" She did not answer the question. She didn't answer the question. It was an easy question to answer. All she had to do was say, "Well, when I got my genetic test back, right? Just now." But obviously she knew earlier, and obviously other people know that she knew earlier, which means she was keeping the con going after she knew. And when you're being honored as the first woman of color to be employed by Harvard Law, you think you might verify that you have a Native American relative,
The
right?
excuse I heard was, how was she supposed to know what the Fordham Law Review wrote about her? And how would they know that Harvard had elected a woman of color if Harvard wouldn't have bragged about it?
Yeah, no kidding. It's absurd on its face. And you're like,
That's why I tell people that we live in a fucking cartoon, by the way, because Absurdon's its face is pretty on brand for what the fuck happened to us. My original theory about this, by the way, uh, is that when that little marmot or whatever got stuck inside the Large Hadron Collider back in 2012, that shifted us into the timeline that we're currently in.
it's a pretty absurd timeline. I mean, I'm not one to bash on Trump a lot just because it's like so overdone, and it's just like the resistance has it fucking covered, and I'm just not part. I'm not part of that bullshit. Um,
I'm
but
so far removed from that bullshit that I don't think that voting in a rigged system inside a duopoly presents a realistic avenue for substantive change. I don't.
yeah, I'm not a Democrat. I'm here to try to hack their system and get Bernie elected, or to create such a big movement around him and such anger about him being cheated again that we can drive that energy somewhere.
But
That's why
yeah,
I'm here.
that's going to happen, and I want to have this conversation with every Bernie supporter that comes on this show. Like, you know that you already know in this moment that this is the most openly rigged in broad daylight fucking primary that we've ever lived through.
Yeah, of
You
course.
you know that, and you know that there are 956 candidates in the race because they need a contested convention, because that's when the super delegates can vote, is on the second round of the
Of course.
convention.
Absolutely.
And we know that there are uh in the name of Russia, Microsoft and the Pentagon
Yeah.
have teamed up to ensure election security. We covered that the day that the Mint Press article came out
Mhm.
on it on this show. Um, knowing that Alex Padilla is still the Secretary of State here in California,
Yeah.
and that bitch ass is responsible for like what 6.8 million votes disappearing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
And people keep
uh,
trying to tell me, "No, no, those were eventually counted." Bullshit.
Yeah, you know
Fucking
what,
bullshit.
dude? I gotta call bullshit on that, and I know that that is Lauren Steiner's fallback position, but Lauren Steiner's fallback positions aren't always fucking right.
Well, she also thinks Warren is still good,
Of
right?
course she does. And
So,
and here's why, dude. Here's why. It would be for the first time in Lauren Steiner's life, one of her getting elected president. Like it for her, she may as well be getting elected
yeah,
president
I know.
if Elizabeth Warren gets
I
elected
feel
president.
like there's a big component of that, and if I would love it if Bernie Sanders was a woman of color instead of an old white guy.
You know what, dude? If you can take your jet to oh god, Martha's Vineyard,
Mhm.
like whenever you want to, and shoot an episode of the Robust Opposition from Martha's Vineyard, you're going to find reasons to excuse a lot of Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I just that's all I need to know about somebody that's if somebody that's really casually involved in this stuff right now, I can forgive them for thinking Warren is good. right? But someone like Lauren Steiner, is it Steiner?
Yeah,
I know who it is, but I wasn't sure if it was a different. Anyway,
I know.
but
I've had
for
Lauren
her,
on this show, and she was on for like almost 3 hours that day.
oh jeez,
And there's stuff that I can agree with her on,
oh
and I
sure,
wanted to have her on because I knew that we would clash on some shit,
yeah,
and I knew that I knew that it would be I knew that it would at least be interesting, but man, the um the amount of fucking like interdimensional yoga
yeah.
it takes
That's a good way
to
of putting it.
be able to say in the same breath that Elizabeth Warren and a Bernie Sanders are equal caliber, care cut from the same cloth candidate is just I don't stretch like that. I
Well, I
don't.
mean, that was the MSNBC thing, right? That's what Rachel Maddow kind of one of the things she used her career to do was to create the perception that Bernie and Elizabeth Warren were just like brother and sister, right? They did that for like 6 years where they kept pushing that, right? And the whole point of that was to someday get another Reagan centrist in the White House, just like Obama, right? Except this time a woman. I mean,
Well, yeah, I've been saying since before the tears were dry on election night in 2016 that the Democrats were going to come out and they were going to try and give you a more electable Hillary Clinton. And if they couldn't do that, they would give you a more electable Obama. And
yeah.
in Kamala Harris, they've got both.
Yeah, yeah, Kamala, I think is the goal. I think that's
Yeah,
their pick.
absolutely. The goal is a contested convention, and it's Elizabeth Warren in third place, giving all of her delegates to Kamala Harris.
Yeah. Does
That's
anybody
the
think
goal.
Warren's going to give her delegates to Bernie? Like, how dumb do you have to be? It's there's no precedent for it. She'd have to have fallen on her head the day before or something. That's not who she is. She's always going to go with the establishment. The only person I trust to do that is Tulsi Gabbard. And if somehow in some weird universe Bernie falls and breaks his hip and can't continue, I would support Tulsi Gabbard and I'd be fine with that. But yeah, Warren is the threat. Kamala Harris is the goal for the opposition, but Warren is the one who can give them the goal, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I've been calling her the Judas goat,
Yeah,
um, because what a Judas goat does is it fucking goes and leads all the sheep into the pen.
yeah.
That's what the Judas goat does. Uh,
I've never heard that, but that makes sense. Yeah,
uh, and that's her job. Her job is to get enough disaffected people who will hold their nose and vote for a woman, but not a black woman initially, the first time around, you know, um, and then give those delegates to Kamala Harris, who will then go on, barring a financial collapse, to lose to Donald Trump
yeah.
and give us 4 more years of Donald Trump.
The only thing
Uh,
I'm kind of heartened by in some of the rigged polls, and I don't know how much I should pay attention to even some of the subtler details because they're rigged, but is that Elizabeth Warren's support is not doesn't overlap that much with Bernie's anymore. She's mostly got people that make over $200,000 a year that are white, right? Like this is Hillary's base. It's not, if she was an effective fraud still, you would expect him there to be a lot more overlap with people that make less money and younger people, but there just really isn't. So that I have some hope in that.
all right, man. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up
Yep.
here because I do have to get up fucking dumb early in the morning. I think you said you do too. Uh,
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on. If people want to holler at you, where can they do that?
At Nial Elkim on Twitter is the best place. That's where I spend most of my time. Social media, so that's just NIALELKIM. And if you Google my name, I'm the only Nial Elkim that exists. So you'll find me, hopefully, in other places if Google will allow you to find me.
And
But
what's your YouTube channel one more time?
YouTube is Niall Elkim versus the world, but you know, that doesn't find it for you because they don't let you really title things unless I put in a lot of my show titles, or I haven't figured it out. Just go to my Twitter, and it's in my link in my description. So easy to find. You can always DM me too. My DMs are open if you have trouble finding anything, you know. And
Right on.
if you want some free artwork, my art's all free to use for anybody for their own personal profit or whatever they want. You can find that on my Facebook, and you can DM me for that too. Uh, I own my originals, and uh, if I ever were successful at art, I would make money on new projects and signing things and stuff. But if people want to use the intellectual property of the digital images, it's free. Just use it. I'm cool with that.
All right, man. Well, thanks again for coming on. This has been Slow News Day. I am Steve Poikinen, and good luck to us all.
And thanks for having me.